All right, I'm recording after the fact, so I'm not going to try to, hide the results like I would if I was recording live. This is Delial versus Midas. Ooh, I could have put the names in. I forgot I can do that in this new pretty program. But I did not do that. We have Delial on the left, who is first turn, and Midas on the right, who is on second turn. And this is how Midas, in their final game, defeated Delial to advance to the semifinals, where he will face, I believe, DJ, which is interesting because they have faced a couple times. Midas has won, I believe, both times they've faced in current tournaments, but they have been interesting matches. DJ was at one point winning the first time they faced in the semifinals Nephilim, and DJ is a very solid player who has also given Delial recently a very tough match, one of his toughest, and in a TTAC, I believe. So I'm very interested in that following match there, and yeah, I think Midas played really well here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start by kind of going over what I think the story of the game is, like how it worked, why what Midas did was so strong, and then we're gonna look a little deeper and look for some alternatives, depending on how much time I have. So Delhi starts with Galagros in 5, and it's hard to come up with a starter on this rule set. This is such a tough rule set for first turn. At first, it seemed kind of balanced in results, but by the end of the round, second turn was just clearly like favored in just about every game. Um, and yeah, it's just hard to get something to work because fundamentally, without plus wall, your corner starters don't really appeal, right? Your corner starters, if you have a 7 facing out, they have an easy lock in on that card. You need a lot of combo setups to be able to justify it. If you don't have a 7 facing out, well, they're the ones who's going to get to determine the setups against your 6s or whatever else. So some players played kind of weak corners with, like, say, 5s facing out. But the problem with that is usually it means, and in fact, Delial in the first game, I think, was just about the only player to ever get an advantage off first turn when he did a corner starter with Galagros, actually, with 5s and 6s facing out. In no other games did someone get an advantage early in the game on first turn. That was the only one. Um, so maybe that suggests kind of these midweek corners are the way to go. But even then, it seemed like there was so much play against an easily capturable corner, and it's also easy to have the cards you use be power that's necessary, right? Like if you imagine, hey, I used this weak corner, but now the game is up left, and I would like to still have 7-4-5-5 in my hand. Which is why in that previous game I think Delhi started with Galagros because that's the sort of least directional commitment. But this is often an advantage of a weak corner. Your weak corner often means its best numbers are facing the wall, which isn't a problem in itself, but it means those are numbers you might still want in your hand because they're facing where the action now is. So I think it's a really difficult rule set to start on. I'm surprised we didn't see side starters. The traditional thing to do on SPC rule sets like this is, have some kind of side starter and then a recapture with a 7 down. You are quite vulnerable to L's. Pretend this card had a 7 facing down. They're the one who gets to determine what the setup is in 4, threatening to go in 5. But you can usually block 5 in a way. Now, again, imagine the card in 3 had a 7 facing down, where they don't actually have that much play against it. And this kind of position could potentially be promising. It could also be absolutely nothing, right? Um, so here you'd get, I guess that doesn't work. Yeah, so maybe that was a problematic path because the L's are dangerous, but I'm surprised we didn't see it at all. Instead, we saw a lot of center starters. And I really like how Midas met this center starter. And I tend to meet center starters with corner setups. But if you're looking for a corner setup, it's hard to play off these 6s, right? And the way you would play off the 6s maybe is something like this, setting up Behemoth, but Delhi has Behemoth in his hand too. And so that really stops being an option. And it's kind of tricky to find setups. So Midas did not go for a setup, he went for a side response, and I really like the angle at which he did so. I think in general, you want to go for side responses when you think the opponent is better side to side or up down, and you can make it the one they're worse at. And so if we look at Delhi's hand, obviously the 7-4-5-5 and the 5-5-7-4 want to go up down. The 6-7-6-3 and 6-3-6-7, it is a lot less obvious which they want to do. Sometimes it's completely dominant up down, but sometimes 6 simply isn't a big enough number. But it is helped in taking 7s by Galagros being in 5. And sometimes they're really good side to side with that 7s being able to flip stuff, and sometimes they're blanked because their 3 is not that good. And I think Midas correctly evaluated Deli's cards just aren't near as good side to side, and I'm going to force the game to be side to side by going in 4 or 6 rather than going in 2 or 8. Now, there's probably very slight differences between 4 and 6. The hands are almost symmetrical, but not exactly due to 5-5-7-4 and 7-4-5-5. But it's also possible I'm just not thinking, yeah, it should be exactly symmetrically the same, right? Yeah. So I think 4 and 6 must be equivalent moves, unless I'm being foolish about how symmetricality works. But I think 4 and 6 are equivalent moves, and I really like them. It's also a card that's very annoying for Deli to take. The kind of first thing I notice here is if Deli captures this way, Midas's only capture back would be comboed if Deli could play 7-4-5-5 again, but Deli can't play 7-4-5-5 in both 7 and 2. And it's kind of clunky for Deli to take Midas's 5s otherwise. So this is, I think, already actually just a really difficult position. Deli goes in 3, which we might think just used a card that is valuable, but 5-5-7-4 similarly is hard to use up because it's your only threat in 1. And 6-7-6-3 and 6-3-6-7 are such powerful sweepers, it's also hard to consider using them. So to me, this seems a natural move. And the one thing I know, I didn't check this game in any depth with the solver, but I did see when the game became winning. This is a losing move. There were, I think, very few ties. I'm not sure exactly how many. This was a losing move. Deli, after the game, said he screwed it up on his second move. He is correct. This was the losing move. Now, that doesn't mean it's obvious to find the win, because there are many promising moves here, right? 6-7-6-3 and 1, and there was only one win. That's the other thing I saw. 6-7-6-3 and 1 is safe and makes 4 safe, right? So this obviously has strong appeal. 6-7-6-3 and 7 is safe, doesn't make 4 safe, but it's pretty hard for Deli to capture 4, given that 5-5-7-4 and 1 gets comboed. So also sort of making 2 cards safe. This card both captures 2 cards and is safe in itself, and Deli might have pretty clumsy recaptures in 2. This is another way to potentially be safe there. It's possible there's other appealing moves as well, though I don't immediately see them. So let's say there's like those 4 appealing moves. Given that this is safe and captures stuff, that's probably more appealing than this one, so maybe there's 3 appealing moves with the behemoths. But I think actually it might seem like there are 3 crushing moves, but if only one of them wins, this is actually a really good practical try from Deli. Because if there are 3 incredibly appealing moves, it's often really, really hard to figure out which one works and which 2 don't. Now, sometimes, all of them work, sometimes 2 of them work, but if only one of them works and you have a lot of appealing options, like imagine a position where only this move was appealing and it won. And imagine a position where this, and maybe this is appealing, and also only this move wins, right? The position where this is the only appealing move, it's much easier to find when there are 3 other things to consider as well, right? It's easier to find the right move when it's the only move that appeals, rather than when there is a sea of appealing moves and you have to pick out the exactly precise option. Which is why I think it's really impressive that Midas did find the best move here. And the best move, I don't know why the other moves don't work. That'll be in our second section. Right now, we're sort of telling the story of the game. Is 6-3, 6-7, and 6. Midas plays very precisely here, and this position does turn out to be winning. Now, I wasn't really here when it happens, but I did have the window open, and I did look over at this moment, and I thought, if there's a save, it's probably 5-5-7-4 and 7, which is the move Delial ended up playing. But I want to say briefly why I think this is the move likely to have a chance. Occasionally there's like banana stuff in 8, sometimes there's stuff in 2, especially if you can grab safety, but you really gotta flip 1. Notice that move wasn't even safe. Um, but the reason 7 appeals is you've just got to give yourself the best sweepers possible, right? You got to give yourself the 2 cards that control the most space. And from a kind of simplistic look, we can see that 6-7-6-3 up top is going to flip at least 1 more card than Midas flips, right? Midas can't flip any cards up top, and 6-7-6-3 will flip 2 cards if it lands in 2, and it will flip 2 cards if it lands in 1, unless Midas has played exactly 6-7-6-3 and 2, in which case it will land 1 card. So you're going to go +1 up top. On the bottom, your 5-5-7-4 is safe, and your 6-3-6-7 is also going to go at least +1, right? Anything Midas puts in 8, it's going to be able to actually just combo in 9, and it's going to go more than +1. It's going to go like +4. And if Midas plays in 9, it at least will capture 5. So you're going to get +1 on both the top and the bottom, right? And that should be enough to tie, right? Visually, this looks like a tie, but it doesn't quite work because we're sort of double counting captures of 5, right? Because a capture of 5 doesn't quite count in the same way as that kind of, I go +1 up top, I capture 1 more card than they do, I go +1 on the bottom. Because if they reflip 5 at some point, or if we're double counting and we're trying to flip 5 twice, we might not end up with quite the score that it immediately counts to. So the move that jumped out to me, and where Midas ended up playing, though I didn't have it fully figured out in my very quick scan, was Midas has to play 9, right? 8 is a disaster, 8 gives Deli so much stuff, and 9 also makes it hardest for Deli's 6-3-6-7. And the only card he can flip from 9 is 5, which is the least valuable card to flip, because it's the only one that can be interacted with from both the top and the bottom of the board. Now, I think the obvious way to do this is 7-5-4-5. You keep your 4-5-7-5, right? Because one thing is, Deli could switch which card he uses where, right? So if we use 4-5-7-5, Deli could switch to using 6-7-6-3 on the bottom. And in fact, now you don't have a capture here because 6-3-6-7 has the same. And your 7-5-4-5 is a blank up here. Deli is going to hold the tie here. Something like this. So then the instinct is to go 7-5-4-5 here. But there is the possibility, right? If Deli goes in 8, if he takes the double capture now, well, Midas has kept a card that can capture and blank 6-3-6-7, right? 4-5-7-5 plays better than 7-5-4-5. Deli kind of used his behemoths the way they're sort of meant to be used, this one for the bottom, the other one for the top. And because 5 is a recapturable square, Midas is now able to go even up top, which is enough to secure the win. But the other thing worth checking, and the reason that for a second I thought he has to use 4-5-7-5, not 7-5-4-5, is not after that move. After this move, 7-5-4-5, if it was still in your hand, could land in 8 and double capture, right? Because now this move doesn't win. I guess 7-5-4-5 wouldn't win either because it combos through. So I really miscalculated in the minute I spent on this game. But the problem with this is 6-3-6-7 is still dead in 8, so it doesn't matter. You just capture here. So yeah, really nice game by Midas. And what I really like about it is, firstly, I think he chose the directions really well. I think SPC can be a really clunky rule set, and Deli's cards don't quite play quite well enough off Galagros, especially with the directionality Midas created. They just end up never being able to use the 5s usefully. And after this, I think Midas also made a really fantastic move because, again, there are many moves that are appealing here. And that he found the win among a number of options that all deserve serious attention is, I think, excellent. And he, I believe, also found the only win here because 4-5-7-5 doesn't quite work. You need it for 2 in 7-5-4-5 and 9. So the first position I'd start looking for alternatives is here, but because I did check with the solver, sorry, here, I did check with the solver, I know there aren't alternatives, so I'm not going to spend time pretending to think there are. I do think 5, 5, 7, 4, and 7 is very much the logical move, and if this move doesn't hold, it's going to take something really special to hold this position. I guess my second guess, just on a very quick scan, would be sometimes something like this just holds, right? They recapture, and then you just have some forcing move here, something like this where you control everything in 8, but the problem is you don't control anything in 9. And again, that's based on Midas's starter, right? Midas is 6, 5, 6, 5, and 4. Set the 6, 3, 6, 7, and 6, 7, 6, 3. They were each going to be good in one direction, but they would be pretty bad in the other direction. And Galagros' 5s facing down don't give them help, right? It doesn't give them any extra pluses. They could plus 8s, but 8s are, of course, not something they have to deal with. So I think 7 was the very logical try, and my instinct looking at this position that happens to be right here, sometimes it's wrong, is if this move doesn't work, the position's probably just lost. So here, there is the question of why this doesn't win, and why this doesn't win. And those seem like tricky questions to me. That does not seem obvious. One thing that comes to mind for me, and I'm not sure about this move. This move looks kind of fun. Because if Midas takes 2, then your 6, 7, 6, 3 actually is a really good sweeper for this endgame, and because you've tied it 5, 5, you don't need it. But I don't think Midas actually has to go in 2 here, and if Midas doesn't go in 2, this probably isn't working. Doesn't look great. So, yeah, I'm not sure. Actually, I can click the dump eval button, and we have to go in 2. So 2 does hold. Obviously, this looks really scary, but you must have some way. 8. You have 8. And the 6s play off each other in the behemoths. You can play either behemoth and 8 to tie. That's fun. I missed that idea. So you block up the top row and hold the tie. Okay. So that's a neat way to hold a tie. Find synergy, right? You play off those 6s down. What about this one? Obviously, this looks not promising. We should have some way to tie. There's always things like grab safety, right there or here. Probably here, right? This looks pretty similar to the game in that we've made the same kind of structure. And again, it doesn't work, this time because of 1 rather than 9. Okay, tell me, good sir, how do we hold here? We go 2 or 8. We either do take safety in 8, and that just barely holds. Okay, it does control 2 and 6 pretty well. Alright, or we have to go in 2. Ugh. That's tough to find. Man, it would not be obvious to me playing this game that 6, 3, 6, 7, and 6 is better than these other options. I think the easiest of these to find for me is that this move would hold. The idea of going in 8 against 6, that seems like in a game more findable. But to find that and also find that this is held by 8, and then also to find that this isn't held by a move like this, it's just a lot of stuff to notice. 6 moves out. This is just a point when, like, I've talked about this before, but if you multiply out probabilities, or like number of sequences, with 1 move left in the game, there is 1 move left, and it's 1 move long. That's very easy to see. With 2 moves left in the game, there are 2 cards for 2 squares. You have 4 possible moves, and each of 1 reply. So there's 4 2-move sequences to consider. With 3 moves left in the game, that's multiplied by 6, so there's 24 3-move sequences to calculate if you're checking everything. With 4 moves left, it's 4 squares and 3 cards, you multiply that by 12. So with 4 moves left, there are Uh, what number was I at? I've lost everything. Is that 24, right? 24 three move sequences, and there's 12 moves, so whatever 12 times 24 is, that should be 144 doubled, so 288. So there's 288 four move sequences. And like, you could do that in 5 minutes if you are a fast calculator. But this is to say, in 5 minutes, calculating everything perfectly every time with four moves left is really difficult. Usually you don't have to, because usually your instincts will lead you to the better options first, and there are moves you can correctly dismiss without checking. But this is to say, four moves left is kind of at the edge of what the best players should be able to do every time. And five moves left should start to get to the point, because we're now just multiplying much bigger numbers, where 5 minutes is just not enough time to check everything. And so you move out of the realm where a pure calculator would be a perfect player, because almost no human is going to be able to pure calculate that quickly. And you move into the realm where you need to have, triple triad skills, and you need to understand I don't have to check this move, and I do get to check other moves. But my point is, there are three moves here, at least three, that are incredibly appealing, and there are five moves left after each, and that's already the point when it's just really hard to calculate. So this is kind of the point where, real triple triad skill has to come in to be able to differentiate these very appealing moves. And sometimes someone just gets lucky, right? But I think Midas played a fantastic move here to find it. So I guess we come back to this position and we ask, how could Delial have tied? And looking at the game continuation, my first instinct is you got to keep 7-4-5-5 in your hand if you're going to play 3, right? That, given this was the problem move, I would much rather have 7-4-5-5 left in my hand than 5-5-7-4, either because it could do the same kind of move in 7 that we did in with 5-5-7-4 in the other line, right? Right? This move obviously looks better if we can do it. Now, Midas probably wouldn't play here because we get options in 2 as well, but even this looks much more appealing. Sure, it's not technically safe, but any capture we do get to combo back. And also, it gives us this new option, which is very nice to have, and we didn't have in the game continuation. So just from the game continuation, it makes you think I should hold on to 7-4-5-5. But if a different move is played, you're going to follow up differently. Now maybe these moves are more appealing. But there is something too, if we're going to put the game up high, we're probably going to want to keep the card that faces the action rather than keep the card that faces away from it. But like, it's still not at all obvious you hold here. I guess you do with the exact same idea we saw before, right? Anything in 8. That's tough. And I don't know if this ties, but the first thing, this is having seen how the game continued though. But having seen how it continued, it feels like if you were going to play in 3, maybe you use 5-5-7-4, and if you were going to play in 9, maybe you use 7-4-5-5, and you keep the card that just has a little more controlling towards the game. Now, this one looks pretty bad to me. And so, yeah, this option exists too. But now there are combos back in 2, right? And if you do it this way, there's no combo back in 8. But if you do it this way, there is a combo back in 2 if you want it, either with this or with this. So it just seems like there would have been a little more play if you keep the 7-4-5-5. But that's, again, a really hard differentiation to make. The hardest thing in Triple Triad is not finding the only move when there's only one move that has a chance. It's finding a move that works when every move looks almost identical. And these moves look very similar, and it's only with hindsight that I'm drawn to this over 7-4-5-5. Does this in fact hold? Yeah, there's no green here, so there's no win. So this would have been a tie, very similar move, really hard to distinguish these. The other thing that comes to mind is sometimes you just have to, force things. Can we force things? Could we just go in 1 or 7 and force the action? Seems like no. right? If we never are able to grab safety, and annoyingly, our only capture here, they always have the other 4-5-7-5 to flip us, and we can see the reverse if we do this up top. Is right, the 7-5-4-5 they keep is always the one that controls the space. Now, sometimes there's a hold here, but like these positions look incredibly dangerous. Could you do it with like take? We just walk into such horrible. So my idea, maybe this is a problem. My idea is, first of all, if they go here, I think we're just planning to go here, and I'm just hoping this holds. I'm just really hoping this holds. And there's a good chance it does, because something like this can be met here, and that does hold, because Behemoth and 6, you combo through 5, right? So maybe this is a chance, but like a move like this is not their only reply. They could also combo you. And then my idea was I was hoping this held. 5-5-7-4 is a nice card to have held on to here. And 6-3-6-7 is safe, right? Do we just sneak it out? Looks like we should have just snuck out a tie. But then there's also, they can take it this way as well, right? They're not limited in their captures. And then they have play against this. But maybe we just about... No, that doesn't hold. Do we have here? No, not... sorry, I meant to 2. Do we have here? No, they combo. Huh. Does this hold? This does hold. Why does this hold? What did I miss here? No, that's not enough. What did I miss? I'm just blanking. Oh, that's safe. I'm a genius. Alright, that was depressing. But the point is, like, so maybe this move in 7 holds. Maybe you can force the action like this. Let's check. Alright, it does hold. This is so hard to justify. There are so many good moves against it. And, like, there are so many good moves against this. And that a move wins against this, but that nothing wins against this is really difficult. I guess I think the upside of looking at moves like this is it is more forcing, right? If I look at this move, I guess there are only like 3 really natural seeming replies, but they're all kind of vague moves. They don't force the action immediately. Well, something like this, all the sequences are pretty forcing in nature, right? If they take, and they should take something, they kind of have to take something. If they take, I'm just planning to take back, right? And I can calculate these sequences, and I just have to find a move here, which I did not find on my own. But, no, have we looked at this one? What was the answer here? This one. No. This one. There we go. I'm not sharp today. So yeah, point is, I think this is so hard. I think this is like the toughest kind of position to save, and the way that top players lose. Yeah, this just looks horrible to me to try to find the answer. I think the squares to look at. There's also, you can consider 6. Um, I guess if we're gonna try to take a lesson from this, one is if you're gonna go in 3 and 9, really be biased towards keeping the card forcing the action. Like, to me, these two moves look very similar, but this one does turn out to be a little better. Even though it keeps kind of fewer potential safeties in your hand in some ways, right? Like, this is safe, and the 7-4-5-5 would not have been safe in the same way. Also, if we do it... Not sure what point I was trying to make. But some bias towards trying to use the card with more power that leaves you with a little more power facing the action when you're going to make a kind of vague leave the board open for your sweeper's move. Ah, that's so tough. And then the other possibility is maybe you can attack things, but like, does this work? If this works as well, this does work as well. That's really interesting. So this one doesn't walk into combos, so maybe it looks more like it should work, but just these moves are so scary feeling to me. But I guess there's only one capture here, and there's only one capture here. So we did limit how much we have to check. And my guess is that similar to last time, there's some kind of key sequence like this as our defensive sequence to hold. We just reversed it from before. And against this, previously this worked, but we needed to find a good move here that I was not good at finding before. But I guess this just does it. Yeah. So 5, 5, 7, 4, and 1 may be the cleanest way to tie. Ah, God, this position looks horrible. I wonder how many ties there are. I'll take a sector on probably. 4. They're in 1, 3, and 7. Yeah, credit to Deli for picking 3, right? Because I can also not differentiate 3 and 9. I have no idea why one of 3 or 9 would work and the other wouldn't. Now, maybe you start looking at the cards and you realize, okay, if you go 3, you can set up like synergies, like you now have a same in 2. And nothing in 9 sets up synergies with these cards. Yeah, but this one sets up a synergy in 8. Doesn't that feel the same? Yeah, so credit to Deli for identifying 3 over 9, because I have no idea why one of them would be better than the other, but you'll notice there is a tie in 3, and there are no ties in 9. And with such symmetrical looking hands, identifying that the slight asymmetricality of 5, 5, 7, 4 and 7, 4, 5, 5 makes 3 better than 9 is kind of remarkable, because they just look the same to me. So that's pretty cool. But you kind of, I guess, have to center attack here, right? You have to play next to it and try to use the squares next to it. But you have no safety there. You have no control of those squares. You have no combo play. You just have to calculate these long sequences out really, really precisely. This is a nightmare. Yeah. Fantastic move by Midas. Really well played match by him. Very deserving to move on. And I'm excited to see how he does against DJ. I have a lot of faith in DJ as a player, and I have a lot of faith in Midas as a player. I recently, probably come out before this one, recorded a video of TTA's Noble 9, and I noted DJ basically never loses to anyone who's not a great player, who's not like a top-end player, like Midas level or better. And it would be really neat to see him finally get a win against someone of that caliber, because that would really make it clear he's a threat in these tournaments. On the other hand, Midas is now 1 win away, I believe, from being the first 4-time finalist not to have a title. Now, of course, he could win and then win the title as well, which would remove that right. But he would, I believe, if he beats DJ and loses in the finals, would now become the player with the most finals to have never won a tournament, passing Chickeny. Kozik used to be the person famous for that. Kozik had 2. Midas is already on 3. He would be on 4. And giving him a very legitimate argument. My pick would still be Chickeny, but a very legitimate argument for the best player to never win. And my second pick would still be Piggyman. I think it's Chickeny, Piggyman, but it might be Midas third on that list if he does that. And also, Midas would be a very deserving tournament winner if he goes on to take the title here. God, this is such a rough position. Just looking at it makes me... I would hate having first turn on this set. This seems so difficult. This might be a set where, having seen a few games, I would just do side starters. Like, I would just say, I need a starter that I know doesn't kill me immediately. And even if I have to have a slightly weird hand to do so, I figure second turn is enough of an advantage I can play it well, and I just gotta find a way to make first turn function. I gotta have my hand built around a starter that should be able to hold at least a tie, right? And even if it's a kind of ugly tie, I can probably fight my way to an ugly tie. The reason I don't like side starters is I think you're often slightly behind. But on a rule set like this, if you're offered being slightly behind on first turn, maybe you accept that deal, right? Maybe that's like, yes, I want to be slightly behind on all my first turns so I can play for a win on second turn because I'm just not going to get a win on first turn. And I love to guarantee being slightly behind rather than having to defend something like this. And maybe I'm wrong about how side starters work here, and maybe that would have been just as dangerous. But maybe my conclusion on this set is side starters. Though also, I think Vid said this that like Yevon probably basically played the perfect hand for this rule set, and maybe with Yevon's hand, it's not as difficult to start because he had numbers his 4-7-3-7 and his 6-7-6-3s played really well off each other. I do think the best build ended up being, you know, 2-6-7-6-3s and a vertical or horizontal 7-7. I think Yevon was probably the most ahead of the curve on hand building. Did a really good job there. So our semifinals are, let's see if I can remember. Seto versus Sergio has happened by the time obviously by the time I publish this video, but has happened before this match happened. And I'm going to record a video on that shortly. And then there is Tezuka versus Yevon, which they've played one game and tied one game. And finally, there's Midas versus DJ, which is a repeat of the semifinals of Nephilim. And go Avalanche. But also, Midas has played awesome, and after this really fantastic win, very high-level win, would obviously be an extremely deserving finalist. But I'm going to root for DJ, who I think is playing really well, and I think has a very real chance to take out Midas here. All right.